I can still hear my grand-grand's voice. Stop apologizing. That was his thing with me, because apparently, even as a little kid, I said I'm sorry about everything. Spill something? I'm sorry. Ask a question? I'm sorry. Not paying attention? I'm sorry. Say I'm sorry one too many times? I'm sorry. Here's the thing. I still do it. I am 45 years old and I still apologize a lot. And every time I do, almost immediately, I think of my grand biting his tongue. Like literally. But the older I get, the more I start to turn that phrase around in my head. I'm sorry. What does it actually mean? Because I don't think it always means what people think it means. And I don't think it's the only word we've been saying on autopilot without really stopping to ask ourselves, wait, what am I actually trying to say right now? That's where we're going today. Words. The ones we use every single day. The ones that have become almost automatic. I'm sorry. Thank you. No worries. Thoughts and prayers. Let me know if you need anything. I love you. We say these things constantly, and sometimes we mean them deeply. Sometimes we say them because we don't know what else to say. And sometimes, and this is the part I think worth sitting with, we hear them completely differently than the person who said them ever intended. This isn't really a conversation about vocabulary. It's a conversation about being human. Welcome back to Being Human on Purpose. I'm Sarah Olin, and I'm really glad you're here. So, my grand. Let me tell you a little bit more about him because, well, he really inspired this episode and I think he deserves the introduction. I'm not sure I ever saw my grand truly angry. Frustrated? Plenty. And easily. Over the small stuff. The spilled milk kind of stuff. Little inconveniences. Things that didn't go the way they were supposed to. He had this thing he'd do when he got frustrated. He'd stick his tongue out and kind of bite it. Like he was physically holding back whatever was trying to come out. Now, sometimes he was just sticking his tongue out because he was concentrating really hard. But when he was frustrated, he'd start gnawing on it. But it would pass. And quickly. It always passed quickly. It's something now that I think makes us smile when we think about him. At least I know it does me. There were enough times when I was the source of that frustration. Now, I look back and they're just memories of him correcting me, not yelling or scolding. And there's two particular corrections that have remained in my nervous system my entire life. One of them was the apologizing, which we've established. The other one was the way I walk. I drag my feet, or more accurately, I drag my heel. When I'm walking with intention, I pick my feet all the way up and I put my feet all the way back down, like any functional adult human. But the moment I'm just floating through a room, sliding through the house, I drag, I shuffle, I glide in a way that apparently was enough to make a man bite his own tongue. I can remember one specific time walking from the car into a store, and he corrected me just once in that moment. And it's the moment that has stayed. I still think about it when I catch myself doing it. I try not to do it, but I don't always succeed. But isn't it strange how that works? It wasn't even a big thing. It wasn't a fight. I wasn't in trouble. It wasn't a defining life moment. It was a man telling a little girl to pick up her feet. And decades later, I still hear his voice. That's what language does. It doesn't just communicate. It imprints. Words spoken with emotion, especially repeated over time, they don't just live in our memories. They become our inner dialogue, the voice in our head that says, pick up your feet when we're shuffling across the kitchen at 7 in the morning. The voice that says, stop apologizing when we catch ourselves shrinking. Words become memory, and memory becomes the voice we carry inside us, which is why this actually matters. The things we say to people and the way we say them, they don't always disappear when the conversation ends. So, I'm sorry. I think there are at least 3 very different things we mean when we say it. The first is accountability. I did something. I regret it. I'm sorry. That's the classic version, the one we teach our kids, the one that's genuinely hard for a lot of people to say, because it requires admitting fault, which requires a kind of vulnerability that doesn't come easy to everyone. The second version is empathy. I didn't cause this. I had nothing to do with it. But I hate that you're in it. That's the one I say constantly. When somebody tells me something terrible happened, before I even have a chance to think about it, I'm so sorry just comes out. And then sometimes they'll respond with, it's not your fault. And I want to say, I know that. That's not what I meant. I'm not apologizing. I'm just sitting beside you in it, emotionally. I hate that you're hurting. The third version, and this one is a little harder to admit to, is tension regulation. I'm sorry as a way of making discomfort stop, making the room feel safe again, smoothing something over, whether it's actually resolved or not. That's the version anxious people know very well, the version my gran was trying to break me of. Because here's the thing. When you say, I'm sorry, every 30 seconds, you start to strip the meaning right out of it. It becomes noise. It stops landing. And the people who genuinely need to hear it when you mean it might not be able to tell the difference anymore. At the same time, and I say this with full compassion, there are people who genuinely cannot say it. Not because they don't feel it, but because apologizing feels like exposure, like handing someone something they can use against you. If you grew up somewhere that vulnerability wasn't safe, if you learned that admitting fault came with consequences, the words I'm sorry can almost feel physically impossible to get out. Neither of those people is broken. Both of them are trying. They're just operating from completely different internal wiring. And maybe, just maybe, the question isn't always, why can't they just say sorry? Maybe it's also, what are they actually trying to communicate, even when the words don't come out right? Here's the thing that I keep coming back to, though, and this is the part that I think changes everything. Words matter, of course they do, but energy matters too, maybe more. Think about it this way. Before babies understand language, they understand tone. They feel safety or threat in the way a voice sounds before they have any idea what the words mean. Dogs respond to how you say something long before they learn what you're saying. Before we understood language, we understood energy. And here's the wild part. Adults do too. We just pretend we don't. Somebody can say, I'm happy for you, with resentment dripping off every word. Somebody else can say, no worries, with enough passive aggression to fill a room. And then somebody else can say, I love you, as a weapon. And somebody can say something completely clumsy and stumbling and wrong, me, and you feel the warmth underneath it anyway. The words are almost like the packaging, and the energy is what's actually inside. Humans are constantly listening beneath the words, even when we don't realize it. We feel sincerity. We feel dismissal. We feel presence. We feel obligation. We feel warmth. And we feel when someone is just going through the motions. So maybe one of the questions worth asking when we receive words that land wrong or feel hollow or confuse us is not just what did they say, but what were they actually trying to give me underneath it? That's not an excuse for harmful communication. That's not asking you to ignore things that genuinely hurt. It's just asking us to stay curious for a second before we react. Because sometimes the most loving thing a person knows how to offer comes wrapped in really awkward packaging. And here's where this gets even more complicated, because so much of our communication now doesn't happen face to face. It happens on screens, texts, emails, DMs, social media comments, group chats. Most of our daily communication is now flat. It's black letters on a glowing rectangle with no tone, no facial expression, no pause before the sentence, no warmth in the delivery. None of the energy cues we just talked about. And so what happens? When we can't feel someone else's energy, we fill in the blanks with our own. We bring whatever emotional state we're currently carrying and we project it right onto those words. You can read a text when you're anxious and read it as a threat. Read it again when you're calm and suddenly it's totally neutral. Same words, same person, two completely different messages because you changed. Think about the word okay. That's it, just okay. From someone you care about. Depending on your emotional state, when you read it, that word can feel like, I hear you. I'm fine. I'm busy. I'm annoyed. We're okay. I'm done talking about this. That tiny word carries the weight of everything we bring to it. And I think this matters so much right now because we're spending more time communicating through written word than probably any other generation before us. And we're doing it while stressed, overstimulated, multitasking, and already half inside our own heads. Of course, miscommunication is everywhere. Of course, we're misreading each other constantly. The miracle is that we manage to understand each other at all. I think the invitation here, and I'm saying this as someone who is absolutely guilty of firing off a text while already annoyed, is to be a little more intentional on both ends. Intention matters more when writing. When you can't show someone your face, when there's no tone to carry the warmth, you have to put it in the words. Use the extra word. Add the emoji. Clarify. Don't assume people can feel what you mean. And grace matters more when reading. When there's no energy cues available, we default to assuming the worst. And sometimes the worst isn't what's there. Sometimes okay just means okay. My boys are two very different people. My youngest has always been openly affectionate, feelings right on the surface, ready to hug, ready to say what he's feeling. From the time he was tiny, he loved loudly, and he expected love back in kind. My oldest is more reserved. He shows up. He does. He's there in the practical ways, in the quiet ways. But the verbal, expressive, arms around you version of love, that's harder for him. When my youngest was little, he would get genuinely hurt that his brother wouldn't say he loved him, wouldn't hug him back the way he wanted to be hugged. And I'd have to sit with him and explain, your brother loves you. He just shows it differently. He shows it by being there, by doing things, by the way he acts, not always the words he uses. That's what the 5 love languages is in its simplest form, right? Gary Chapman talks about this, the idea that we all have a primary way of giving and receiving love, and they don't always match up. One person says, I love you through physical touch, another through acts of service, while another through words of affirmation. And if you're speaking your love language and they're fluent in a different one, you can love each other fiercely and still feel like you're not being loved at all. What I've tried to teach my kids and what I keep working on myself is this. The most loving thing you can do as the giver is try to love people the way they receive love, not the way it's natural for you to give it, the way they actually take it in. But the most compassionate thing you can do as a receiver is to stay open. If the person giving isn't there yet, if they haven't figured out your love language, try to hear their intention. Try to feel what they're reaching toward, even if the delivery isn't perfect. Sometimes you have to hear the words the way the speaker means them, not the way you would use them. Let's talk about thank you for a minute, because I think this one goes the other direction. If I'm sorry is a word people oversay in some ways, thank you is one I don't think people say enough, especially to the people closest to them. There's something that happens with familiarity. When someone has been showing up for you for years, doing the invisible things, carrying the quiet labor, being consistent in ways you've stopped even noticing, gratitude has a way of fading into assumption. You stop seeing the effort because it's always just there. And that's the thing about invisible effort. It's invisible. The person doing it can feel it. They just can't always tell if you do. A simple thank you, and I mean a real one, a seen one, not the reflexive over-the-shoulder kind, can completely change someone's day, their week, the way they feel about what they're doing. You don't have to return the favor. You don't have to find a way to make it even. Sometimes just acknowledging the thing, I noticed, I see you, thank you, is the whole thing. Gratitude doesn't always require repayment. Sometimes acknowledgement is enough. And then there's love. I believe, genuinely, fully in the core of who I am, that love is always the answer. That sounds like a bumper sticker, and I know that. But I mean it, not as a slogan. I mean it as a lens. When I'm confused about what to do, or how to handle something, or what someone needs from me, lead with love is the question I come back to. What does love look like here? And I think part of what makes that hard is that we've made the word love so small. We've narrowed it down to romance mostly, or at least that's the version that gets all the airtime. And I think that in doing that, we've made people uncomfortable with the word in any other context. We've made it weird to love your friends out loud, strange to express genuine care for people outside of a romantic or family context. Like the word itself got a dress code that only a few relationships get to wear. But love is so much bigger than that. Love shows up every time someone acts with kindness. Every time someone is patient when they didn't have to be. Every time someone teaches you something, really teaches you, with care. Every time someone drives 2 hours to pick you up, then ride passenger for another 2 hours so you can practice driving. Even when they fuss about you dragging your feet. My grand-gran was love. Even in his frustration, even biting his tongue, even saying stop apologizing for the 10th time on a single drive. That was love. It was just wrapped in something that didn't always look like it. And maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe that's what this whole conversation comes back to. Most people, most of the time, are doing their best with the language and the emotional vocabulary they have. They're reaching toward each other. Sometimes they nail it. Sometimes they say, "I'm sorry," when they really mean, "I love you." Sometimes they say, "No worries," when they mean, "Please don't feel guilty. I've got you." Sometimes they go quiet when they mean, "I don't have the words for how much I care." Maybe none of us communicate perfectly. Maybe we never will. But I think being human on purpose means slowing down enough to ask two questions. What am I actually trying to say? And maybe even more importantly, what is this person actually trying to give me underneath the words? Because if words are energy, then maybe what we're really exchanging every time we speak isn't just information. It's something more like an attempt at connection, an imperfect, very human attempt. And there's a nervous system on the other side of every conversation, whether it's face-to-face or on the other end of a text bubble, or somewhere on the receiving end of whatever we wrote at 11 o'clock at night when we were too tired and didn't choose our words carefully enough. There's always a person there, trying to understand and be understood. And maybe, just maybe, if we could slow down long enough to hear the love underneath the clumsy wording, we'd find it's there more often than we think. Love is always the answer, even when it sounds a little like stop apologizing. Thanks for spending some time with me today. If something in this episode landed for you, if you found yourself thinking about a word you've been saying on autopilot, or maybe hearing someone a little differently than you did before, share it. Pass it along, because that's really what this is all about. Showing up with a little more intention, listening a little deeper, giving the people around us just a little more grace. Give me a like, hit that subscribe button, share it with someone who needs it. And until next time, be a little more human, a little more on purpose. All my love.